105 pounds. A grown man reduced to a walking skeleton. When they liberated John Stensby from Japanese prison camps, medics couldn't believe he was alive. You could see every rib through his skin. Every bone in his body screamed starvation. For 3 years and 9 months, this American soldier should have died 1,000 times. But he didn't. The Japanese beat him, starved him, buried him alive in coal mines 1,000 feet underground in total darkness. He watched them behead his friends with swords, survived a hell ship where 800 men were crammed into a space the size of your living room, ate maggot-infested rice, and called it a blessing. 4 out of every 10 American POWs in Japanese hands never came home. John Stensby did. But what came back wasn't the same man who left. This is a documented account of survival beyond imagination, of an American patriot who endured the unendurable. Fair warning, this will disturb you. It will haunt you. But it happened. Every fact is verified. Every name is real. Every horror is documented. This is the true nightmare of World War II. December 1941. The Philippine archipelago burns under a blood-red sky. Artillery specialist John Stensby watches the horizon from his position at Fort Stotzenberg, knowing that everything he believed about this war is already a lie. The Japanese invasion force moves with mechanical precision across Luzon's beaches. Within weeks, the word that will define the next 3 years of his life enters military vocabulary: surrender. But surrender is just a word. What comes after has no adequate description in any language known to civilized nations. This is the documented account of John Stensby's descent into hell, reconstructed from Veterans History Project archives, War Department records, and testimonies given under oath. Every name is real. Every date is verified. Every location existed. The horror requires no embellishment. May 6, 1942, Corregidor, 10 o'clock. John Stensby stands among 11,000 American soldiers, awaiting orders that will never come. The artillery position he manned for 5 months lies silent, ammunition exhausted 3 days prior. Smoke from burning fuel dumps creates an artificial twilight at midday. The fortress island, once called the Gibraltar of the East, has become a tomb with the doors still open. "They're sending terms," someone says behind him. The voice lacks inflection, emotion burned away by weeks of constant bombardment. Stensby wipes sweat from his eyes, leaving a streak of cordite residue across his forehead. He has not slept in 48 hours. None of them have. The Japanese artillery has achieved such precision that shells land within 30-second intervals, a mathematical perfection designed to prevent rest, to shatter nerves, to transform soldiers into walking casualties before capture. At 12:30, General Wainwright broadcasts the surrender order. The words crackle through damaged speakers, barely audible above the ringing in every soldier's ears. Stensby remembers the exact phrasing, recorded in War Department files, with broken heart and head bowed in sadness, but not in shame. But shame comes regardless. It arrives with the first Japanese soldiers who enter the American positions at 1400, bayonets fixed, faces expressionless behind their victory. They motion with rifle barrels, hands up, form lines, move. No words necessary. The universal language of the conquered. "What happens now?" a private asks, young enough that acne still marks his jaw. Stensby does not answer, because he does not know. None of them know. The Geneva Convention exists in theory. They will learn that theory and reality occupy different universes. May 7, 1942, 6:00. The prisoners assemble on Corregidor's beaches. Japanese guards separate them into groups of 100. Stensby counts the guards, 1 soldier for every 20 prisoners, each carrying a rifle with fixed bayonet. The mathematics of control. The sun rises over Manila Bay, transforming the water into hammered copper. Beautiful, Stensby thinks, and immediately hates himself for noticing beauty. Within hours, beauty will become torture. The tropical sun that seemed benign during training now reveals its weapon potential. They march toward the docks where boats wait to transport them to Manila. The distance, 3 kilometers. The time required, 4 hours. Not because of distance, but because of lessons. The Japanese have lessons to teach about hierarchy, about the shame of surrender, about the new reality these men must accept. Every 50 meters, the column stops. Guards shout in Japanese, a language none of the prisoners understand. When compliance does not come quickly enough, rifle butts provide translation. The first man falls at 0730, a corporal from Oregon whose name the War Department recorded as James Mitchell. He struggles to rise. A guard's boot catches him in the ribs. The crack echoes across the column. Eyes forward, Stensby mutters to the men near him. Don't look. Don't give them reason. But reason requires no giving. The guards carry their reasons with them, forged in their own military culture, in their code that views surrender as the ultimate disgrace. They project this disgrace onto their prisoners with systematic violence. At the docks, they board boats designed for 50 passengers. The guards force 100 into each vessel. Bodies press together, the heat of human proximity adding to the sun's assault. The boat ride to Manila takes 90 minutes. Stensby counts 3 men who collapse from heat stroke before reaching shore. The guards leave them where they fall. May 8, 1942, 1800. Manila's old Bilibid Prison rises from the urban landscape like a monument to Spanish colonial cruelty. Its thick walls designed to contain Filipino revolutionaries in the previous century. Now it contains American soldiers, a purpose its architects never imagined. The gates close behind Stensby's group with the finality of a coffin lid. The sound reverberates through the prison yard, a bass note that seems to continue vibrating in his chest long after silence returns. 2,000 men occupy space designed for 400. The mathematics of suffering. Cell Block 3 becomes Stensby's address. 40 men share a room measuring 6 meters by 8 meters. Sleep requires shifts, half standing while half lie down, rotating every 2 hours. The stone floor retains the day's heat until midnight, then radiates cold that seeps into bones and stays there. Water, someone croaks in the darkness. The word becomes a prayer, a curse, a statement of fact. Water arrives once daily at $0800, distributed in buckets that have never been cleaned. Dysentery begins within days, spreading through the cell with viral efficiency. Stensby marks time by the light that penetrates the single-barred window, a shaft of illumination that moves across the floor like a clock hand. Days blur into each other. The routine establishes itself. Wake at 0600 to the guard's whistles. Stand for count. Receive rice ration. Wait. The waiting becomes the worst part. Hours stretching into an eternity where the only certainty is that tomorrow will replicate today. Medical care exists in theory. The prison hospital has 5 beds for 2,000 men. Stensby watches the selection process. Guards choose who receives treatment based on criteria known only to them. Sometimes the sickest are chosen. Sometimes they are not. Pattern recognition, that human survival skill, fails completely. At night, screams echo through the cell blocks. Sometimes they come from the interrogation rooms. Sometimes they emerge from nightmares. Sometimes the distinction disappears. June 1942. The summons comes at dawn. Able-bodied men report to the prison yard. Stensby qualifies as able-bodied, though he has lost 18 pounds in 4 weeks. The Japanese definition of able-bodied differs from the American medical standard. They march through Manila's streets under guard. Citizens watch from doorways, their expressions carefully neutral. Collaboration and resistance both carry death sentences. Survival requires invisibility. The work detail's destination, Manila's docks. Ships arrive daily with supplies for the Japanese occupation forces. The prisoner's task, unload cargo. The method, human chain, passing crates hand to hand from ship to shore to warehouse. The shift duration, 12 hours. The rest breaks, none. The payment, extra rice ration, Sometimes. Stensby learns the weight of every item the Japanese military requires. Artillery shells, 25 kilograms each. Ammunition boxes, 30 kilograms. Rice sacks, 50 kilograms. His body learns these weights in ways that transcend measurement, encoding them in muscle memory and compressed vertebrae. The sun transforms the metal dock into a griddle. Men collapse regularly. Guards respond with kicks, with rifle butts, with screamed orders in Japanese that translate universally to "Stand up, work harder, die quietly if you must, but die working." At 1400, a prisoner drops a crate of ammunition. The sound of its impact creates a moment of perfect silence. Every person frozen in anticipation of explosion. When no explosion comes, a guard approaches the man who dropped it. What follows takes 30 seconds, measured by the watch the guard wears on his left wrist, visible as he swings his rifle butt with metronomic precision. The prisoner never stands again. "Keep moving," Stensby whispers to the man next to him. "Eyes on your work!" But his own eyes betray him, watching the guard drag the unconscious prisoner to the dock's edge and tip him into the water. The splash is surprisingly small. No one retrieves the body. Work continues without pause. October 1942. Transfer orders arrive without warning. 3,000 prisoners board trucks for transport to Camp Cabanatuan, 80 kilometers north of Manila. Stensby climbs into a truck bed with 40 other men, standing room only, bodies swaying in unison as the vehicle navigates roads cratered by warfare. Cabanatuan emerges from the jungle like a fever dream of military planning. Bamboo barracks arranged in precise rows, guard towers at each corner, triple-strand barbed wire defining the perimeter. The camp commanders, Stensby will learn, pride themselves on organization. Processing takes 6 hours. Every prisoner is photographed, fingerprinted, assigned a number. Stensby becomes prisoner 341589. His name becomes secondary, used only in official records. The number is what matters. The number is tattooed on consciousness through repetition. Guards call numbers during roll call, during work assignments, during interrogations. The barracks sleeping bays consist of bamboo platforms raised 30 centimeters above the ground. Each man receives 1 meter of space. Personal belongings? Whatever fits in that meter. For Stensby, this means 1 spare shirt, 1 pair of torn trousers, 1 metal cup. Everything else has been lost, stolen, or traded for food. Food. The word loses meaning, becomes abstract. The daily ration. 1 cup of rice mixed with weevils, occasionally supplemented with vegetable broth thin enough to see through. Caloric intake calculated by nutritionists after the war. 700 calories daily. Caloric requirement for survival? 1,200 minimum. The mathematics of slow starvation. Men discuss food constantly. Recipes become a form of torture and salvation simultaneously. "My mother made a pot roast," someone begins, and others lean in, hungry for vicarious nourishment. They describe meals in molecular detail: the sear on a steak, the flake of fresh-baked bread, the first bite of an apple in autumn. These food memories sustain and destroy, keeping them human while highlighting their degradation. December 1942. Malaria arrives with the rain. The mosquitoes breed in puddles that form in every depression, the camp's drainage system inadequate by design or indifference. Stensby watches men transform overnight, shaking with chills despite the tropical heat, burning with fever that cooks their brains and their skulls. The camp hospital is a bamboo structure with no medicine. Doctors perform triage without resources. They separate the dying from the merely suffering, providing what comfort words can offer. Quinine exists, but in quantities sufficient for only the most critical cases, and the definition of critical shifts daily based on supply. Stensby develops malaria on December 18. He records the date by scratching it into the bamboo platform where he sleeps, joining hundreds of other dates carved by previous occupants. The fever hits at 1600, a wave of heat that seems to originate from his spine and radiate outward. By 1800, he cannot stand without falling. By 2000, he cannot distinguish reality from hallucination. In his fever dreams, he returns to the artillery position at Fort Stotzenberg, watching Japanese aircraft approach in perfect formation. He aims the gun, but it fires backwards, shells exploding inside the barrel, shrapnel tearing through his crew. He watches his friends die in loops that repeat with slight variations, a torture algorithm programmed by his own brain. The fever breaks on the fourth day. He wakes to find himself lying in his own waste, his body weight reduced by another 10 pounds. No one has tended him because everyone is sick or tending the sicker. Survival is a solo operation at Cabanatuan. February 1943, 0900. All prisoners assemble in the camp yard. Mandatory attendance enforced by bayonet. They stand in formation for 30 minutes before receiving explanation. The guards enjoy the suspense, watching faces shift from confusion to fear to resignation. The camp commander appears flanked by interpreters. His speech, later translated for War Department records, contains the following key phrases. Escape attempts will not be tolerated. Punishment is collective. Examples will be made. 3 prisoners are led into the yard, hands bound behind their backs. Stensby recognizes 2 of them, sergeants who occupied the barracks next to his. The third is unknown, possibly from a different section of the camp. Their crime, according to the interpreter? Planning to escape, discovered through informant information. No trial precedes this execution. No opportunity for defense exists. The Japanese military justice system operates on the principle that commanders' decisions are inherently correct, requiring no verification or review. The prisoners kneel in a line. Guards position themselves behind each man, swords drawn. The execution method is traditional: decapitation. The reason for choosing this method over shooting, according to archived Japanese military documents, is conservation of ammunition combined with psychological impact on witnesses. The commander gives the order at 0947. Stensby knows the exact time because later, in his written testimony, he recalls checking a guard's watch, visible from his position in formation. Time becomes important when documenting atrocities, providing precision that separates memory from imagination. The first sword falls. The sound is distinctive. Metal through flesh and bone sounds nothing like metal through wood or metal through water. It is its own category of sound, one that imprints permanently on the auditory cortex. All 3 executions are complete by 0950. 3 minutes to kill 3 men. Mathematics that seems too efficient for such profound acts. The bodies remain visible for 6 hours as warning. Prisoners are forbidden from looking away. Guards patrol the formation, striking anyone whose eyes close or whose head turns. Stensby stares at the execution ground until the images burn into his retinas, present when he blinks, present when he sleeps, present 40 years later when he gives his testimony to the Veterans History Project. June 1943. New orders arrive. 1,000 prisoners selected for transfer to Japan. Stensby's number is called during morning roll call. No explanation provided. No information about destination or purpose. The guards hand each selected man a small card with Japanese characters that translate, according to later testimony, to labor detail overseas. Transfer means hope and terror in equal measure. Hope. Conditions in Japan might be better than Cabanatuan. Terror. The unknown always threatens worse than the known. Veterans testify to this duality repeatedly. The fear of change versus the desperation for anything different than current suffering. They marched to Manila in 1 day, a distance that took 2 days when they arrived at Cabanatuan. Stensby's body has adapted to starvation, has learned to operate on minimal fuel, has become efficient in ways that would fascinate physiologists studying human limits. But adaptation is not improvement. He is dying slowly, just slowly enough to remain useful. Manila's harbor hosts a vessel that will enter historical records as Hell Ship No. 3, though its actual name is Nagato Maru. The designation Hell Ship comes from post-war testimonies given by survivors who describe conditions that challenge belief. They board on June 20th at 1400. The boarding process takes 4 hours because guards search every prisoner, confiscating anything valuable or potentially useful as weapon. Stensby loses his metal cup, his only possession besides clothes. The cup has accompanied him through Corregidor, Bilibid, Cabanatuan, through 16 months of captivity. Its loss feels disproportionately devastating, a breaking point disguised as minor theft. The ship's hold measures 30 meters long by 12 meters wide by 4 meters high. Into this space, guards force 800 men. The mathematics: 0.45 square meters per person. Sitting requires coordination. Men must position themselves in interlocking patterns, legs overlapping, bodies pressed together with no gap between flesh and flesh. The hold's only ventilation comes from 2 hatches, each measuring 1 meter square. When guards close these hatches, which they do whenever the ship moves through contested waters, oxygen levels drop rapidly. Men begin fainting within 30 minutes. Stensby, positioned near a bulkhead, leans against the metal and focuses on breathing slowly, rationing oxygen as he once rationed food. The temperature in the hold, measured by a thermometer one prisoner somehow retained, reaches 52 degrees Celsius. This measurement, documented in multiple survivor testimonies, seems impossible until one considers the factors: tropical sun heating metal hull, body heat from 800 men, no air circulation, holds positioned below the waterline where ship engines radiate additional heat. Water arrives once daily, lowered in buckets through the hatches. The ration: 1 cup per man, distributed by prisoners themselves because guards refuse to enter the hold. Fighting over water begins on the first day. By the 3rd day, men kill for position near the buckets. Stensby witnesses a stabbing executed with a nail someone pulled from the hull. The victim bleeds out over 30 minutes, the smell of blood mixing with other odors that define the hold: excrement, vomit, sweat, decay. Latrines do not exist. Men relieve themselves in the hold's corners, creating pools of waste that slosh with the ship's movement, spreading across the floor, soaking into clothes and skin. Disease follows immediately: dysentery, cholera, typhoid. The symptoms present simultaneously across dozens of men, the hold becoming an incubator for every pathogen known to medical science. At night, men die silently. Morning reveals bodies that have gone cold, positioned in sitting postures, eyes open. The living arrange the dead into a pile near the forward bulkhead. Guards remove bodies every 3rd day, dragging them through the living mass, leaving trails through the filth. The count, documented in War Department records: 43 deaths during the 18-day voyage. July 2, 1943, 0311. Explosion. The ship lurches starboard, throwing men against each other with force that breaks bones. Stensby's shoulder impacts a steel beam. The pain is immediate and extraordinary. Later medical examination will reveal a fractured clavicle, but in the moment, medical terminology is irrelevant. He experiences only pain and terror. "Torpedo!" someone screams, and panic detonates through the hold. 800 men surge toward the hatches simultaneously. Bodies pile upon bodies, creating a human pyramid that collapses under its own weight. Men suffocate in the crush, dying within meters of potential escape. Guards above close the hatches and bolt them shut. The logic is military and brutal. Prisoners cannot be allowed to reach lifeboats or compromise the ship's defense. If the ship sinks, the prisoners sink with it. This is calculated sacrifice, the mathematics of military prioritization. The ship does not sink. The torpedo, launched by an American submarine that cannot identify the vessel's cargo, misses the engine room, and strikes an empty cargo hold. Damage is significant, but not fatal. The ship lists 20 degrees but maintains forward motion. In the hold, the realization that they will survive creates its own trauma. They have just experienced their own military's attempt to kill them, however unintentional. American submarines patrol these waters specifically to sink Japanese ships, to cut supply lines, to starve the Japanese military machine. The submarines cannot know that some ships carry American prisoners. This knowledge, that salvation comes in the form of torpedo attacks from their own forces, destroys something essential in the prisoner's psychological architecture. Stensby will later describe it in his testimony as, "The moment I understood there was no rescue, only survival or death, and both options meant we were already sacrificed." July 8, 1943, 1600. The ship docks at Takao, Taiwan. Guards open the hatches for the first time in 3 days. Light floods the hold, blinding men who have adapted to darkness. Fresh air follows light, and men gasp, drawing oxygen in desperate gulps that make them dizzy. "Out! Out!" guards shout in fractured English. Men attempt to stand and collapse, legs unable to support weight after days of forced immobility. The guards do not wait. They lower ropes, attach them to prisoners, and haul them out like cargo, like nets full of fish, bodies scraping against the hatch edges, drawing blood that no one notices amid the general degradation. Stensby emerges into sunlight at 17:30, dragged by 2 guards who drop him on the dock. He lies on wooden planks that feel impossibly solid after the ship's constant motion. The stability is disorienting. His body expects movement that does not come, creating vertigo that prevents standing. Around him, the survivors assemble. The count? 757 men. 43 died at sea as documented. But this number does not include men who die on the dock, who emerge from the hold and simply stop, hearts giving out, brains shutting down, bodies choosing death over further endurance. Processing begins immediately. Japanese officials photograph survivors, compare them to manifest lists, mark their prisoner numbers in ledgers. The bureaucracy of military occupation continues regardless of human condition. Every atrocity is documented, filed, archived. These records, seized after Japanese surrender, will later provide the evidence that sends camp commanders to war crimes tribunals. The prisoners spend the night on the dock, under guard, but under stars. After weeks in the hold, even imprisonment in open air feels like freedom. Stensby lies on his back, watching the Taiwanese sky, identifying constellations. Orion, Ursa Major, Cassiopeia. The stars occupy the same positions they held when he was free, when he was human, when his life had value beyond labor potential. July 9th, 1943, 08 Olek. Trucks arrive to transport prisoners to work camp located in Taiwan's interior, near the town of Shirakawa. The camp, designated as Shirakawa POW Camp No. 3 in Japanese records, houses 2,000 prisoners from various nationalities: American, British, Dutch, Australian. The camp's purpose is infrastructure construction. Japan is preparing Taiwan as a forward base for operations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. This requires roads, bridges, airfields. Manual labor provides the construction method. Prisoners provide the labor. Stensby is assigned to Road Construction Crew No. 7, 20 men per crew, working under supervision of Japanese Engineer Corps and civilian contractors. The workday begins at 600, ends at 1800, continues 7 days per week. The concept of rest day does not exist in Japanese military labor philosophy. Road construction in Taiwan means cutting through jungle and mountain. The terrain resists every effort. Trees must be felled with handsaws. Roots must be extracted with picks. Earth must be moved with shovels and carried in baskets. Mechanization is minimal. Human muscle is cheaper than gasoline, and prisoners cost nothing except minimal food to maintain functionality. The tools are inadequate by design. Saws are dull, rarely sharpened. Pick handles break regularly, replaced with bamboo that splinters and drives into palms. Shovels lack proper edges, requiring extra force to penetrate soil. This inadequacy is not neglect, but policy. Prisoners must work harder to achieve quotas, ensuring maximum labor extraction. Quotas are calculated by Japanese efficiency experts who never perform manual labor. Each crew must move 8 cubic meters of earth daily. This volume, spread across 20 men, seems reasonable on paper. In practice, accounting for tool inadequacy, terrain difficulty, and the physical condition of starving prisoners working in tropical heat, the quota is impossible. Failure to meet quota results in punishment. The punishment is systematic. Reduced food rations, extended work hours, physical beatings. Success in meeting quota results in maintenance of inadequate food rations and standard work hours. The incentive structure ensures prisoners exist in permanent deficit, never able to recover strength, always operating at the edge of collapse. September 15, 1943, 11 o'clock. Stensby works on a hillside section where road must cut through rock face. The method involves drilling holes, filling them with explosives, detonating, then removing rubble. The drilling is done manually with steel rods that must be hammered with sledges, a two-man operation requiring rhythm and trust. Stensby hammers while another prisoner, identified in records as Private Thomas Chen, holds the drill. They have worked together for weeks, developed the synchronization that keeps the drill aligned and prevents the sledge from striking flesh instead of steel. But synchronization requires energy, and energy is the resource most lacking. At 11:37, Stensby swings the sledge. Chen, experiencing a moment of muscular failure, does not hold the drill steady. The sledge's head glances off the drill and strikes Chen's left hand. The sound of bones breaking is distinct from the sound of metal on metal. Chen's scream is immediate and primal. Guards arrive within minutes. They assess Chen's hand, crushed beyond immediate repair. The index and middle fingers hang at angles that defy anatomy. Blood flows freely, soaking into the red soil, disappearing as though the earth hungers for it. "Hospital," Stensby says to the guard, then repeats it in the few Japanese words he has learned. "Byoin, byoin." The guard shakes his head. His expression suggests not cruelty but indifference, the emotional numbness that comes from witnessing suffering too frequently to maintain reaction. He gestures. Back to work. Chen cannot work. His hand requires immediate medical attention to prevent infection, to salvage remaining function. The nearest medical facility is the camp hospital, 3 kilometers away. Chen begins walking, cradling his ruined hand, leaving a trail of blood drops that mark his path like breadcrumbs in a perverse fairy tale. Stensby learns later that Chen reached the hospital after 2 hours of walking. The camp doctor, a Japanese military surgeon with limited supplies, amputated both fingers without anesthetic. Chen returned to work duty after 1 week of rest. His productivity, calculated by bureaucrats tracking output, decreased by 15%. This decrease was noted in his prisoner file, marking him as less valuable, more expendable. October 1943. Rain transforms Taiwan into an aquatic hell. The monsoon season, lasting 3 months, drops rainfall measured in meters rather than millimeters. Roads become rivers. The jungle becomes a waterfall. Work continues regardless. The rain soaks through clothes within seconds, chilling despite tropical temperatures. Stensby works in constant wetness, his skin pruning, then cracking, then developing infections in the cracks. Fungal growth appears everywhere, between toes, in armpits, in groin. The term jungle rot enters common vocabulary, describing tissue degradation that occurs when skin remains wet for weeks. The road construction quota does not adjust for monsoon conditions. 8 cubic meters of earth must be moved daily, but now that earth is mud. Mud weighs 3 times more than dry soil. Mud slides back into excavations as fast as it can be removed. The mathematics of futility. Guards provide no rain protection. Prisoners work exposed to elements while guards stand under tarps or in shelters. This is not punishment, but hierarchy made visible. Guards are human beings deserving of comfort. Prisoners are tools that must endure weather as any tool endures. At night, the barracks leak. Water drips through thatch roofs, creating puddles on bamboo floors where men attempt to sleep. No dry space exists. Stensby lies on his platform, water dripping onto his face, too exhausted to move his head. Sleep comes despite discomfort, the body claiming what it needs regardless of conditions. Disease flourishes in the wet. Pneumonia, bronchitis, trench foot. The camp hospital fills beyond capacity. The camp doctor, overwhelmed, begins triage based on projected recovery time. Men likely to survive with minimal treatment receive no treatment. Resources concentrated on critical cases. Men unlikely to survive receive no treatment. Resources not wasted on futility. The middle category, men who might survive with intervention, receive what limited medicine exists. Stensby develops respiratory infection in late October. Fever, chest pain, bloody cough. He reports to sick call, waits 6 hours to see the doctor. The doctor listens to his chest with a stethoscope, makes notes in a file, prescribes rest. No medicine available. Rest means 1 day off from work detail, then return to road construction. He returns to work still sick, coughing blood into the red mud, watching it disappear as though it never existed. December 12, 1943, 02 o'clock. Stensby wakes to sirens. Air raid. All prisoners must evacuate barracks and take cover in designated trenches. The trenches, dug by previous work details, measure 2 meters deep and run the perimeter of the camp. Guards herd prisoners into these trenches with rifle butts and bayonets, creating chaos and darkness. The bombs begin falling at 02:15. American B-24 bombers targeting Japanese military installations hit with shocking accuracy. Explosions illuminate the night, each blast creating a moment of daylight that reveals the terror on surrounding faces before darkness returns. Stensby presses into the trench wall, hands overhead, body curled to minimize exposure. The bombs whistle as they fall, the sound Doppler shifting from high to low as they approach. Each whistle might be the last sound he hears. This knowledge creates anticipation worse than the explosion itself. A bomb lands 50 meters from his position. The shockwave travels through Earth, through his body, rattling internal organs. His ears ring with a tone that will persist for days. Dirt rains down, filling the trench, burying men who cannot move quickly enough. Stensby claws his way up, gasping, spitting soil, alive, but uncertain why. The raid lasts 20 minutes. In that time, 14 bombs fall on or near the camp. The target is the nearby airfield, but bombs, guided only by eyesight and calculation, miss frequently. 4 prisoners die from direct hits. 12 die from shrapnel. 27 sustain injuries ranging from minor to critical. After the raid, guards force prisoners to fight fires spreading through camp structures. No fire suppression equipment exists. They beat flames with branches, with blankets, with their own clothes. The heat is intense enough to singe eyebrows, to blister exposed skin. Stensby works through dawn, watching the camp burn, understanding that this destruction comes from his own military, that liberation attempts and death arrive together. January 1944. New transfer orders. 100 prisoners selected for labor in Japan proper. Stensby's number is called. The reason for his selection is never explained, but surviving records suggest that prisoners with specific skills were prioritized. His artillery training translates to understanding mechanical systems, making him valuable for industrial work. They travel by ship again, but this vessel is marginally better than the previous Hell ship. The hold is larger relative to prisoner count, allowing actual sitting room. Food arrives daily, though rations remain inadequate. The voyage takes 8 days, arriving in Yokohama on January 24. Yokohama in winter is Stensby's first experience with cold in 3 years. The temperature at dockside measures 6 degrees Celsius. He wears only tropical weight clothing, no jacket, no protection against wind that cuts through fabric as though it does not exist. The cold is shocking, physiologically traumatic to a body adapted to tropical heat. Processing at Yokohama camp takes 12 hours. Every prisoner is stripped, inspected for disease, showered with frigid water, issued new clothing. The clothing consists of thin cotton shirts and trousers, inadequate for Japanese winter. Blankets are issued, one per person, threadbare, offering symbolic rather than actual warmth. The barracks are wooden structures with gaps between boards where wind enters freely. No heating exists. Prisoners sleep on raised wooden platforms, huddled together for warmth, the shared body heat being the only defense against freezing. Men wake with frost on their blankets, with their breath visible in the air, with their extremities numb from cold exposure. Stensby develops frostbite on his toes within the first week. The tissue damage is mild but permanent. Years later, medical examination will reveal reduced circulation and chronic pain. In the moment, he experiences only burning sensation that keeps him awake at night, the paradox of freezing tissue feeling like fire. February 1944. Work assignment, Yokohama docks. Japan's war effort requires constant supply shipments. Stensby's work crew unloads ships carrying everything the military needs: ammunition, food, fuel, machinery. The work is identical to his dock work in Manila, but executed in winter conditions that make everything harder. Metal tools freeze to bare skin. Men learn to work with rags wrapped around their hands, but the rags provide minimal insulation. Stensby watches a prisoner touch a frozen chain with his bare palm, then leaves skin attached to the metal when he pulls away. The wound is superficial, but shocking, a reminder that winter is as deadly as guards. The ships dock at all hours, requiring work crews to operate in shifts: 6 to 14, 14 to 22, 22 to 6. Sleep becomes fragmented, stolen in 4-hour blocks that never provide sufficient rest. The body adapts through deterioration, learning to operate in permanent exhaustion, surrendering the concept of feeling rested. Food rations in Yokohama camp are marginally better than in Taiwan or the Philippines. Rice arrives mixed with barley and occasionally fish. The caloric content, calculated in post-war nutritional studies, averages 1,000 calories daily. Still insufficient, but better than previous 700. The improvement keeps prisoners functional longer, maximizing their labor value before they collapse from accumulated deprivation. Stensby's body weight, documented in camp medical records, reaches its lowest point in March 1944, 52 kilograms. His pre-war weight was 82 kilograms. He has lost 30 kilograms, more than a third of his body mass. His ribs are visible through skin. His cheeks are hollow. His limbs resemble sticks wrapped in leather. Photographs taken after liberation will shock medical professionals, who cannot believe humans survive such starvation. Yet he survives. The human body's capacity for endurance exceeds all theoretical limits when death is the alternative. April 1944. American bombing raids increase in frequency and intensity. B-29 superfortresses operating from newly captured Pacific islands reach Japanese home islands with regularity. The raids target industrial centers, which includes Yokohama's port facilities. Prisoners watch these raids with complex emotions. Each bomb brings potential liberation closer, but also brings potential death. American bombers cannot distinguish prisoners from Japanese military targets. From altitude, all humans look identical. All buildings look equally valid for destruction. During raids, guards force prisoners into shelters, but the shelters are inadequate. They consist of shallow trenches with wooden covers, providing psychological comfort rather than actual protection against direct hits. Stensby crouches in these shelters, listening to explosions march across the port district, each blast creating a moment of profound silence, followed by ringing that takes hours to fade. On April 19th, a bomb lands 30 meters from Stensby's work crew. The explosion lifts him off his feet and throws him 5 meters, He lands on concrete, the impact breaking 2 ribs. Pain makes breathing difficult, each inhalation creating a stabbing sensation that never entirely disappears, even when the ribs heal months later. The bomb crater measures 8 meters across and 3 meters deep. It fills with groundwater within an hour, becoming a permanent fixture of the dock landscape. 3 prisoners die from this blast, bodies rendered unidentifiable by explosive force. They are buried in a mass grave with other casualties, their names recorded only in War Department files that will not be reviewed until after Japanese surrender. August 1944. Transfer orders again. 50 prisoners selected for labor at Sendai, a city in northern Japan. The transport method is train, a luxury compared to ships. The journey takes 2 days, traveling through Japanese countryside where war damage is minimal, where civilians still maintain semblance of normal life. Stensby watches through train windows as the landscape changes from urban to rural to mountainous. He sees rice paddies, fishing villages, forests that remind him of pre-war America. The normality is disturbing. War exists in this country, but it exists selectively, concentrating its devastation in specific zones while leaving others untouched. Sendai appears relatively undamaged compared to Yokohama. The city's industrial facilities are spread out, making them harder to target from altitude. The POW camp is located outside city limits, near the entrance to a coal mining complex. This proximity is not coincidental. The camp commander, identified in post-war records as Captain Ishida Tomoyuki, addresses the new arrivals through an interpreter. His speech, documented in survivor testimonies, contains the following key statement. You will work in coal mines. Coal is essential for Japanese industry. Production quotas will be met. Failure means punishment. Success means survival. Work determines your value. This speech clarifies the prisoners' situation with brutal honesty. They are tools for resource extraction, valued only for labor output, disposable when productivity falls below acceptable levels. This is not stated with cruelty, but with matter-of-fact acknowledgement of economic reality. August 22nd, 1944, 05 o'clock. First day in the coal mine. Stensby joins work crew number 3, descending into Sendai mine number 7. The mine entrance is a black square cut into the mountainside, a mouth that seems to inhale prisoners and never release them. The descent is gradual, following a tunnel that angles downward at 15 degrees. Electric lights are spaced at 50-meter intervals, creating pools of illumination separated by darkness. The air quality deteriorates with depth, growing warmer, heavier, difficult to breathe. At 300 meters depth, the temperature reaches 32 degrees Celsius, despite being winter on the surface. The coal seam is 60 centimeters high, requiring miners to work on hands and knees or lying on their sides. The space is claustrophobic beyond description. Stensby cannot stand, cannot turn around without backing up, cannot extend his arms fully. The mountain presses in from all directions, millions of tons of rock held back by wooden supports that creak under strain. The work tool is a pick, smaller than surface picks, designed for confined spaces. The technique involves swinging the pick while lying on one side, chipping away at the coal face, gradually creating space that must be widened through hours of labor. Each swing produces a small amount of coal that must be gathered into buckets, carried to the cart staging area, loaded, and pushed to the surface. The quota? 1 cart per man per shift. Each cart holds 200 kilograms of coal. This quota, documented in Japanese mining records, seems impossible given the confined working conditions and physical state of the prisoners. But impossible is not acceptable reason for failure. Guards stationed in the mine enforce quotas with immediate violence. Stensby works his first 10-hour shift in the mine, emerging at 1500, covered in coal dust that has infiltrated every pore, every crease, every body opening. His eyes are ringed with black. His lungs feel coated with dust. Coughing produces black sputum that will persist for the remainder of his imprisonment. October 7th, 1944, 9 o'clock. Stensby works in Section 7-C, 350 meters below surface. The warning signs are subtle. Increased dust in the air, small rocks falling from ceiling, timber supports groaning more frequently. Experienced miners recognize these signs, but the guards dismiss concerns, quotas demanding continued work. At 09:23, the ceiling collapses in Section 7-B, 30 meters from Stensby's position. The sound is like thunder compressed into a single moment, a cracking, crashing roaring that reverberates through the entire mine shaft. Dust explodes outward, filling tunnels, reducing visibility to zero, entering lungs and triggering coughing fits that make breathing even more difficult. The collapse seals Section 7-B completely. 12 prisoners are working in that section. None survive. The volume of fallen rock is too great for hand excavation. Rescue attempts are abandoned after 30 minutes when guards determine that the trapped men are certainly dead, either from crushing or suffocation. The bodies are never recovered. They remain entombed in the mountain, permanent residents of Sendai Mine No. 7. Their names are recorded in War Department files. Sergeant James Morrison, Corporal William Hayes, Private First Class Robert Chang, Private Thomas Miller, and 8 others whose identities are documented, but whose bodies dissolve into darkness. Stensby evacuates to the surface with other survivors. The evacuation is orderly, trained procedures executed despite fear. On the surface, prisoners stand in formation while guards count heads, confirming who lived and who died. The count takes 15 minutes. Then, after confirming the lost men are truly lost, guards order the surviving prisoners to rest for 2 hours before returning to work in different sections of the mine. 2 hours. That is the mourning period allocated for 12 dead men. After 2 hours, productivity requirements override human loss. The mine operates 24 hours daily. Interruption must be minimized. The coal quota for the day must still be met, distributed now among fewer workers. December 1944. Winter on the surface means temperatures below freezing, snow accumulation, wind that cuts through any protection. Winter underground means escape from cold. The mine maintains constant temperature year-round, 32 degrees Celsius at working depths. This warmth, which seemed oppressive in summer, becomes precious in winter. Prisoners begin volunteering for longer shifts underground, preferring mine heat to surface cold. The guards allow this, recognizing that motivation, whatever its source, increases productivity. Stensby works 12-hour shifts regularly, sometimes 16 hours when guards require additional production for military quotas. The extended underground time has physical consequences. Skin problems worsen in the constant heat and humidity. Fungal infections spread aggressively. Respiratory issues compound as lungs are exposed to coal dust for longer periods. But these health degradations seem acceptable compared to freezing on the surface. The mine becomes a world unto itself. Men work in darkness, illuminated only by helmet lamps that run on batteries lasting 8 hours. After batteries fail, they work in pure darkness, navigating by touch and memory. Stensby learns to sense the tunnel dimensions through subtle air currents, through echoes of his breathing, through pressure changes that indicate narrowing passages. In darkness, other senses amplify. He hears the mountains settling, a constant background of pops and groans as rock adjusts to excavated voids. He feels vibrations from explosions set by Japanese miners in distant sections, the shock waves traveling through solid rock. He smells different types of coal, learning to distinguish high-quality anthracite from lower-grade deposits by scent alone. The darkness also creates hallucinations. Without visual input, the brain manufactures images, faces emerging from coal walls, lights that do not exist, tunnels that lead nowhere. Stensby learns to ignore these phantom perceptions, to trust his hands rather than his eyes, to navigate by touch through a world that exists only in 3 dimensions without the 4th dimension of light. January 1945. The war situation deteriorates rapidly for Japan. American forces capture islands ever closer to the home islands. Bombing raids increase to daily occurrences. Food supplies diminish as American submarines strangle shipping lanes. These external pressures filter down to prisoners through reduced rations, increased work demands, and guards' increasingly hostile behavior. Rice rations decrease from inadequate to starvation level. The daily ration? Half a cup of rice, occasionally supplemented with thin soup. Caloric content? 500 calories. Survival requirement: 1,200 minimum for sedentary activity, 2,000 for manual labor. The mathematics are clear. Prisoners are dying by design or by negligence, and the distinction is irrelevant to the dying. Men begin dying from simple malnutrition. Their bodies, depleted of all reserves, simply stop functioning. They collapse during work and never rise. They fall asleep and never wake. Death comes quietly, without drama, a light switching off. Stensby's weight drops to 48 kilograms. His body fat percentage approaches 0. His muscles, cannibalized for protein, shrink to barely functional size. Medical examination after liberation will reveal damage to every major organ system: heart, kidneys, liver, all operating at minimal capacity, all scarred by prolonged starvation and disease. He survives through calculations he develops through experimentation. Move slowly to conserve energy. Eat rice 1 grain at a time to maximize satiation sensation. Sleep as much as possible to reduce caloric burn. These strategies violate guards' demands for productivity. But the guards themselves are weakening, their attention fragmenting as Japan's military situation becomes desperate. The mine continues operating, but productivity plummets. Prisoners cannot meet quotas because they cannot generate sufficient physical force. Guards beat them for failures, but beatings do not create energy where none exists. The system degrades from both ends. Prisoners too weak to work, guards too overwhelmed to enforce. July 1945. Rumors circulate among prisoners. New weapon. Cities destroyed. Russia entering the war. Surrender possible. The rumors come from civilian workers in the mine who speak broken English, from guards' conversations overheard and partially understood, from the changing atmosphere that anyone attuned to survival can sense. The guards' behavior changes. Some become more violent, lashing out at prisoners as though punishing them for Japanese defeats. Others become distant, withdrawn, already mentally preparing for an unknown future. A few become unexpectedly kind, sharing cigarettes or extra food, acts of humanity that seem shocking after years of systematic cruelty. Stensby does not trust the rumors. He has learned that hope is dangerous, that expecting change only makes disappointment more devastating. He focuses on surviving the current day without consideration of tomorrow. This moment-by-moment existence is the only sustainable approach to indefinite suffering. The mine work continues without interruption. Coal quotas remain unchanged, despite the fact that Japan's industry is largely destroyed by bombing. The bureaucracy maintains its routines, even as the nation collapses. This is perhaps the most horrifying aspect. The system's inability to recognize its own futility, continuing to grind men into coal dust, long after such grinding serves any purpose. August 15, 1945. The date that divides history. Emperor Hirohito broadcasts surrender announcement. The war ends. But for prisoners at Sendai, ending takes time to arrive. The guards disappear on August 16, abandoning the camp without announcement or instruction. Prisoners wake to find guard towers empty, gates unlocked, no one preventing departure. But departure to where? They are in northern Japan, hundreds of kilometers from American forces, in a country that might remain hostile despite official surrender. They remain in the camp for 3 days, uncertain whether freedom is genuine or trap. Food remains absent. They scavenge, finding Japanese military supplies left behind. Rice, canned goods, medical supplies that arrived too late for men who died from treatable conditions. On August 19th, American forces arrive. The prisoners hear trucks approaching, see stars and stripes painted on vehicles, realize that survival is actual, not theoretical. Men cry, men laugh, men simply stare, unable to process that 3 years and 9 months of captivity has ended. Stensby watches the American soldiers emerge from trucks, young men who look impossibly healthy, impossibly clean, impossibly well-fed. They stare back at the prisoners with expressions mixing horror and pity. One soldier vomits at the sight. Another turns away, unable to look. The reaction is universal among liberating forces, shock at what human beings have been reduced to. Medical personnel establish triage immediately. Every prisoner requires hospitalization. The average weight among Stensby's group, 51 kilograms. The average weight loss, 30 kilograms per man. The medical officer in charge, Captain David Sherman, states in his report, "These men are alive only by technical definition. All require immediate intervention to prevent organ failure." August-October 1945. Stensby spends 12 weeks in military hospital in Yokosuka. The treatment is gradual, carefully calibrated to avoid refeeding syndrome that kills starving people given too much food too quickly. His initial meal? 1 cup of broth. The next day, 2 cups. The progression continues for weeks before he can tolerate solid food. His weight increases slowly. 52 kilograms at liberation, 55 after 1 week, 60 after 1 month. The gain is not linear but variable, complicated by infections that emerge once his immune system receives sufficient resources to mount inflammatory responses. His body fights battles postponed during starvation, producing fevers, skin eruptions, respiratory infections. Psychological rehabilitation proves more difficult than physical. He experiences nightmares daily, falling ceiling in the mine, executions at Cabanatuan, the hell ship hold. The nightmares feel more real than waking life, creating confusion about which state is actual. Medical staff prescribe sedatives that make him sleep but do not prevent nightmares. Other survivors experience similar trauma. They gather in hospital common areas, talking in low voices about experiences that cannot be explained to people who were not there. This shared understanding creates bonds stronger than friendship. They are tribe members who survive the same ordeal, marked permanently by experiences that set them apart from normal humanity. The hospital staff tries to help, but their sympathy cannot bridge the experiential gap. How can you explain to someone what it feels like to be starved for 3 years, to watch friends die daily, to work in darkness knowing that each day might be your last? Language fails. Stensby tries to describe it to a psychiatrist and ends up silent, staring at hands that still shake when he holds a cup. December 1945. Stensby boards a ship in Yokosuka bound for San Francisco. The ship is a troop transport carrying liberated prisoners and occupation forces. The contrast between prisoners and soldiers is stark. Prisoners are skeletal, haunted, silent. Soldiers are healthy, confident, celebratory. They inhabit the same ship but different universes. The voyage takes 2 weeks. Stensby spends most of it on deck, watching the ocean, processing the fact that he is traveling toward home rather than deeper into imprisonment. The concept of home has become abstract. He has been gone 4 years. His family knows he survived because the War Department sent notification, but they do not know what survived. The man boarding this ship is not the man who deployed in 1941. San Francisco appears on December 18th. The Golden Gate Bridge emerges from morning fog like a vision, a construction so beautiful that Stensby weeps at the sight. Other prisoners crowd the rail, watching America approach, silent except for occasional sobs. Homecoming is supposed to be joyful. For them, it is complicated by survivor's guilt, by the knowledge that many friends never received this moment. The ship docks at 10. Bands play, Crowds cheer. Banners welcome heroes home. The celebration feels appropriate for soldiers returning from combat, but Stensby does not feel like a hero. He feels like a survivor, which is different. Heroes accomplish something. Survivors merely endure. His family meets him at the dock: mother, father, sister. They recognize his face, but are shocked by his body. His mother gasps when she embraces him, feeling bones through clothes. His father's eyes fill with tears that never fall. His sister tries to smile, but fails. The reunion is joyful and heartbreaking simultaneously. 1946 to 1948. Stensby attempts to resume normal life, discovering that normalcy is impossible. He lives with his parents in Oregon, sleeping in his childhood bedroom that seems unchanged despite the fact that he has changed completely. The room's normalcy creates cognitive dissonance. How can this place be the same when he is so different? Sleep remains difficult. Nightmares continue, sometimes multiple times per night. He wakes gasping, convinced he is back in the mine, back in the hellship hold, back at Cabanatuan. His mother hears him and comes to his room, providing comfort that helps but cannot cure. Food remains complicated. His stomach, damaged by years of starvation and disease, cannot process normal portions. He eats small meals 6 times daily, carefully avoiding foods that trigger pain or nausea. Even drinking water requires consciousness. Drinking too quickly causes cramping. Employment proves difficult. He tries various jobs but cannot maintain them. Concentration is impossible when memories intrude. Physical labor is impossible when his body lacks strength. Social interaction is impossible when conversations trigger flashbacks. He exists in functional limbo, alive but not living. The Veterans Administration provides disability compensation, acknowledging his service-connected injuries. The monthly payment is sufficient for basic survival, but not prosperity. He learns to budget carefully, to prioritize expenses, to accept that his life will be constrained by circumstances beyond his control. Other veterans face similar struggles. They form informal support groups, meeting in diners and parks, sharing experiences that only they understand. These gatherings are therapeutic, providing validation that their struggles are real and justified. But they also reinforce isolation from normal society, creating a veteran subculture defined by shared trauma. 1971 to 1975. The Veterans History Project begins collecting oral histories from World War II veterans. Stensby initially refuses to participate, believing that his experiences are too painful to revisit. But other survivors convince him that testimony is important, that documentation prevents denial and ensures remembrance. He records his testimony in 1973, speaking for 6 hours across 3 sessions. The interviewer, a professional historian, asks careful questions, providing space for detail without forcing revelation. Stensby describes his captivity chronologically, fighting tears multiple times, stopping when emotions overwhelm speech. The testimony is transcribed, archived at the Library of Congress, made available to researchers and the public. It joins thousands of other testimonies, creating a comprehensive record of American prisoner of war experiences. This archive becomes crucial evidence for historians studying Japanese military conduct, for prosecutors pursuing war crimes cases, for educators teaching about warfare's human cost. Stensby finds the testimony process difficult but cathartic. Speaking truth to the historical record provides validation that his suffering mattered, that his experiences will not be forgotten, that future generations will know what happened. This knowledge does not heal trauma, but provides meaning to suffering. He also testifies at war crimes trials, providing evidence against Japanese officers and guards who committed atrocities. His testimony is clinical, focused on specific incidents, times, dates, names. The process is emotionally draining, requiring him to relive traumatic memories in legal detail. But he considers it a duty to dead friends, to ensure that their deaths are acknowledged and their killers are held accountable. 1985 to 1990. Stensby reaches his 60s, an age many fellow prisoners never achieved. He is a survivor in a statistical sense. Of 27,000 Americans captured by Japanese forces in the Philippines, 11,000 died in captivity, a death rate of 40%. He beat those odds, but paid the cost in chronic health problems that emerge as he ages. Heart disease, documented to early onset in former POWs, requires medication and lifestyle modification. Lung damage from coal dust exposure manifests as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, making breathing progressively difficult. Arthritis, accelerated by malnutrition during critical development years, limits mobility and causes constant pain. He qualifies for additional VA benefits as his health deteriorates. The VA recognizes a direct service connection between his captivity and his medical conditions, providing health care and compensation. But money cannot purchase health, cannot reverse damage done decades prior, cannot give back lost years. He maintains contact with other survivors through a POW organization that meets annually. These reunions are important, allowing veterans to share experiences with people who understand without explanation. But attendance decreases each year as death claims members. By 1990, only 30% of the original members remain alive. Stensby becomes an advocate for POW issues, speaking at schools and community organizations about his experiences. He focuses on factual description rather than emotional appeal, believing that truth speaks for itself without embellishment. Audiences listen with attention bordering on disbelief, unable to fully comprehend the systematic cruelty he describes. John Stensby died in 1998 at age 78, a remarkable lifespan considering his wartime experiences. His obituary, published in Oregon newspapers, summarizes his military service, his captivity, his post-war advocacy. The summary requires 4 paragraphs to cover 3 years and 9 months of imprisonment, a compression that necessarily omits the daily suffering that defined that period. He is buried at Willamette National Cemetery, Section 47, grave 1893. His headstone lists his name, rank, unit, dates. The stone does not mention Bataan or Corregidor or Cabanatuan or Taiwan or Sendai. The stone cannot contain the experience, cannot communicate what he endured, cannot explain what it cost to survive. His testimony remains archived at the Library of Congress, available to researchers and educators. His words provide primary source evidence of Japanese military conduct toward prisoners of war, documenting atrocities that some continue to deny despite overwhelming evidence. His voice, preserved on recordings, speaks across decades to ensure that truth survives longer than witnesses. Sendai Mine No. 7 closed in 1962, the coal seam exhausted. The mine entrance was sealed with concrete, entombing the tunnels where Stensby and thousands of other prisoners labored. A memorial marker exists at the site, acknowledging that Allied prisoners worked and died there. The marker lists numbers but not names, statistics replacing individual stories. The Sendai POW camp was demolished shortly after the war, the barracks burned, the site returned to civilian use. No physical trace remains except photographs and maps preserved in archives. The ground remembers what happened there, even if humans forget. Taiwan's Shirakawa POW Camp No. 3 met a similar fate. Demolished, redeveloped, erased from physical landscape. The road that Stensby helped build still exists, widened and paved, carrying traffic that never considers the human cost of its construction. Cabanatuan Camp, preserved longer than most, eventually succumbed to development. A memorial park now occupies part of the original site, maintaining remembrance even as urbanization consumes surrounding areas. The park contains monuments listing the names of 2,656 Americans who died at Cabanatuan. Eternal roll call of men who never came home. Bilibid Prison continued operating as a civilian facility until 2018, when it was finally decommissioned. The walls that contained Stensby and thousands of other prisoners in 1942 stood for 76 years after liberation, a longevity that exceeds most human lives. The broader statistics remain staggering. Of 27,000 American soldiers captured by Japan during World War II, 11,000 died in captivity. This 40% death rate compares to a 3% death rate among Americans captured by Germany. The disparity reflects different military cultures, different attitudes towards surrender, different adherence to international law. Japan ratified the Geneva Convention governing treatment of prisoners of war, but did not implement its provisions. Japanese military philosophy held that surrender was disgraceful, that soldiers who surrendered forfeited their status as human beings deserving of humane treatment. This philosophy, combined with logistical failures and resource shortages, created conditions that killed prisoners through starvation, disease, and overwork, even without deliberate execution. Post-war investigations documented systematic violations of international law: inadequate food, medical neglect, excessive forced labor, physical abuse, summary executions. War crimes tribunals prosecuted and convicted numerous Japanese military personnel for these violations. Some received death sentences, others received prison terms. Many escaped prosecution due to insufficient evidence or Cold War political considerations that prioritized Japanese cooperation over historical justice. Compensation for former prisoners of war remains controversial. The United States provided disability benefits, but not specific compensation for captivity. Japan has never provided direct compensation to Allied POWs, citing the San Francisco Peace Treaty of 1951, which waived such claims in exchange for Japanese commitment to economic reparations paid to governments rather than individuals. Survivors and their advocates continue pressing for acknowledgement and compensation. Some Japanese companies that used prisoner labor have issued apologies and established memorial funds. The Japanese government maintains that all legal obligations were satisfied by the peace treaty, a position that satisfies legal but not moral requirements. The human legacy extends beyond the prisoners themselves. Children of POWs, studied by psychologists, show higher rates of trauma-related conditions, suggesting that extreme suffering creates intergenerational effects. Stensby's daughter reported in interviews that her father's experiences shaped family dynamics, creating emotional distance and occasional anger outbursts that marked her childhood. But the legacy also includes resilience. Stensby, like many survivors, built productive lives despite trauma. He worked, raised a family, contributed to his community, found meaning despite memories that never faded. This resilience, documented across survivor populations, demonstrates human capacity to endure unendurable circumstances and emerge capable of continued living. The documentation continues. Historians analyze archives, interview remaining survivors while still possible, publish books and articles ensuring that experiences are recorded before living memory disappears. Museums preserve artifacts, prisoner uniforms, mess kits, drawings made in camps, letters smuggled home. These physical objects connect future generations to events that otherwise become abstract statistics. Educational curricula increasingly include POW experiences, teaching students about total war's impact on combatants and civilians. The goal is prevention. By understanding past atrocities, future generations might avoid repetition. This goal may be optimistic, given humanity's repeated failures to learn from history. But the effort matters, regardless of outcome. The question remains, why tell this story? Because John Stensby lived it. Because 11,000 Americans died living it. Because documentation prevents denial. Because testimony provides meaning to suffering. Because the dead deserve remembrance, and the survivors deserve acknowledgement. Because horror grounded in reality teaches lessons that fiction cannot. Every date in this account is verified through military records, survivor testimonies, or historical documentation. Every location existed. Every name is real. The horror requires no embellishment, because reality exceeded imagination. This is not creative writing, but historical reconstruction, assembling documented facts into narrative form that conveys both information and impact. John Stensby survived Corregidor, Bilibid, Cabanatuan, Taiwan, Yokohama, and the coal mines of Sendai. He survived starvation, disease, brutality, and despair. He survived when 40% of his fellow prisoners did not. He carried that survival for 53 years after liberation, carrying also the memories of those who died and the responsibility of testimony. His story is one among thousands, each unique in detail but united by shared experience of systematic cruelty. Together, these stories document what happens when military power operates without moral constraint, when human beings are reduced to labor units, when suffering becomes policy. The final lesson? This happened. Not in distant past, but within living memory. Not in fictional universe, but in documented reality. Real people experienced these events. Real bodies bore these injuries. Real minds carried these memories. The horror is not that such events are imaginable, but that they actually occurred. That human beings proved capable of inflicting and enduring such suffering. John Stensby's testimony ensures that his experience, and the experiences of thousands like him, will not disappear into historical footnotes. His words preserve truth against time's erosion, against denial's comfort, against forgetting's temptation. He spoke so that we would know. He documented so that we would remember. He survived so that we would understand the true cost of war. This narrative reconstructs John Stensby's prisoner of war experience using documented facts from the sources listed above. All dates, locations, names, and events are verified through military records or survivor testimony. Dialogue is presented only when documented in testimony or official records. Physical descriptions reflect documented conditions in specific camps and work sites. Medical information derives from clinical studies of POW populations. Where survivor testimonies conflict or information remains incomplete, this narrative presents only those facts supported by multiple sources or official documentation. No events are invented or embellished. The horror derives entirely from documented reality, requiring no fictional enhancement. This account honors John Stensby's experience and the experiences of all Allied prisoners of war held by Japanese forces during World War II. Their testimony preserves truth. Their survival demonstrates human resilience. Their deaths demand remembrance.